So apparently, I'm the worst person in the world because I had a few drinks and said some things I probably shouldn't have. Everyone's acting like I committed some unforgivable crime when really, David just couldn't handle a little reality check about our relationship. But let me start from the beginning so you understand what actually happened, not the dramatic version everyone else is probably telling. David and I had been together for 4 years, ever since freshman year of college. We moved in together during the pandemic because it made sense financially, and honestly, he was convenient. He's one of those reliable guys who always does the dishes and remembers to buy groceries, which was perfect for me since I had enough stress dealing with my course load and family drama. He's not exactly exciting, but he was stable. And at 23, I figured stable was probably smart. The thing is, David has always been kind of sensitive about everything. Like overly sensitive in a way that gets exhausting after a while. He'd get all weird if I mentioned guys from my past or if I made jokes about relationships that he thought were mean. I learned pretty quickly that I had to walk on eggshells around certain topics, which honestly felt pretty controlling. Even though he never said I couldn't talk about stuff, it was just this unspoken thing where I knew he'd get all quiet and pouty if I said the wrong thing. Everything got more complicated a few months ago when my dad was diagnosed with cancer. Suddenly, I'm dealing with doctor's appointments and insurance calls and watching my mom fall apart, all while trying to keep my grades up and maintain some kind of normal life. Time he tried to be supportive, but he has this annoying way of hovering and asking how I'm feeling every 5 minutes, like I'm going to break down or something. Sometimes I just wanted to drink a few beers and forget about everything for a while, but he'd get this concerned look and suggest we talk about our feelings instead. The drinking became more regular because, honestly, it was the only thing that helped me relax. A few drinks after dinner, maybe some wine while studying, going out with friends on weekends. Nothing crazy, just normal college stuff. But David started making these little comments about how much I was drinking, like he was keeping track or something. He'd count my beers or make faces when I poured a glass of wine, and it was so annoying. Here I am dealing with my dad possibly dying, and he's worrying about me having a few drinks to cope? When I did drink more than usual, sometimes I'd get frustrated with him and say things I probably shouldn't have, like he's not exactly built like a great god. Sometimes, when I was drunk and annoyed, I might make comments about his appearance or compare him to guys I dated before. It's not like I was trying to be mean, I was just being honest about things that bothered me. He's pretty average in the physical department, especially compared to my ex Tyler, who was actually impressive in that area. After I'd sober up, I'd always apologize and explain that I was just stressed about my dad and didn't mean anything by it. But David would get so dramatic about these conversations, acting like I'd said the most horrible things in the world. He'd be all quiet and hurt for days, which just made me more frustrated because I'd already apologized. I started to think he was kind of pathetic, honestly. Like every couple has fights and says things they don't mean. That's normal. But he'd hold on to every little comment like I'd personally attacked his character or something. The night everything fell apart, I was really looking forward to going out with my friend Natalie. I'd had a particularly bad day dealing with my dad's insurance company, and I just wanted to drink and have fun and not think about cancer or medical bills or any of that depressing stuff. David volunteered to be our designated driver, which I appreciated because it meant I could actually relax for once without worrying about getting home. We went to this popular bar downtown that's always packed on weekends. David got himself one beer and then just sat there, being his usual boring self, while Natalie and I actually had fun. I was drinking pretty heavily, but I deserved it after the week I'd had. David kept giving me these looks like he disapproved, but he didn't say anything because he knew I'd call him out for being controlling. At some point, David went to the bathroom, and Natalie and I started having one of those honest girl conversations you have when you're drunk. She was talking about her ex and how much she missed the physical side of their relationship. And I guess I started talking about Tyler and how different he was from David. Tyler was the guy I dated junior year of high school, and honestly, he was the biggest I'd ever been with. Like, significantly bigger than David, who's pretty average in that department. I might have mentioned that I sometimes miss that aspect of being with Tyler, and Natalie thought it was hilarious and started making jokes about David being like a sleeve compared to Tyler. She was being dramatic and loud about it because she was drunk too, and I was laughing because it was kind of funny in a mean way. I know it sounds bad, but girls talk about this stuff all the time. It's not like guys don't compare their girlfriends to other women they've been with. When David came back from the bathroom, I could tell something was wrong because he had this weird look on his face. Then this random drunk guy at the bar asked him if he was the sleeve guy, and I realized some people must have overheard our conversation. David's face went completely red, and he just turned around and walked out of the bar without saying a word to either of us. I was honestly more annoyed than anything else. Like, yes, it was embarrassing that some stranger overheard us, but it's not like I announced it to the entire bar. It was just bad luck that someone was eavesdropping on a private conversation and decided to be a jerk about it. David was acting like I'd taken out a billboard advertising his personal business, when really it was just typical drunk bar nonsense that everyone would forget about by morning. With rising irritation, Nally and I had to call an Uber home because David had left us stranded, which made me even more angry. I mean, he volunteered to be the designated driver. You can't just abandon people because you got your feelings hurt. That's not how being responsible works. The whole ride home, I was getting more and more upset about how he'd overreacted to what was basically just girl talk that got a little out of hand. When I got home about an hour later, David was packing a bag. Not just throwing some clothes together, but actually packing, like he was moving out. I started texting him asking what the hell he was doing, and when he didn't respond, I called him. He sent me straight to voicemail, which made me even angrier. I left him a message telling him he was being ridiculous and that we needed to talk about this like adults instead of him having some dramatic meltdown. I kept texting him throughout the night, first telling him how unreasonable he was being, then gradually realizing that maybe I needed to approach this differently. By morning, I was sending long apology texts, explaining that I was drunk and stressed about my dad, and that I didn't mean anything I'd said about Tyler. I told him that what happened at the bar was just bad luck, and that I was sorry he got embarrassed, but that it wasn't really my fault some drunk stranger decided to be an idiot. He didn't respond to any of my messages, which was so frustrating because I was clearly trying to fix things. I must have sent 20 texts that morning explaining my side of the story and apologizing for the parts that were actually my fault. But David was being stubborn and dramatic, probably enjoying making me worry about whether our relationship was over. The next day, he showed up at our apartment with Sarah, his childhood friend who's been discovering her sexuality for the past few years. Sarah's one of those girls who dated guys in high school, then decided she was gay in college and only dated women, and now apparently she's pansexual or whatever. She's always been kind of fake sweet to me, but I could tell she didn't really like me. David brought her along to help him get his stuff, which felt like a deliberate choice to make things more awkward. I immediately started apologizing and trying to explain what had really happened. I told him I was sorry he got embarrassed, that I knew I'd messed up by drinking too much and letting Natalie get me into that conversation. I even offered to let him look through my phone and social media accounts to prove that I wasn't talking about our private business with other people. It really was just that one stupid conversation that got overheard, but David wasn't interested in working things out. He told me that how I'd humiliated him was something he just couldn't get over and that he was tired of my drinking and how I treated him when I was drunk. He made it sound like I was some kind of alcoholic who abused him regularly, when really I just sometimes said things I didn't mean when I was stressed and drunk. Every couple goes through that kind of stuff. I tried to explain that I didn't mean what I'd said about Tyler, that David was more than enough for me, and that I was just drunk and talking nonsense with Natalie. I told him it was really Natalie's fault for getting me started on that conversation and making those jokes about the sleeve thing. And obviously, the alcohol was a factor too. I would never say things like that sober, but he wasn't listening to any of my explanations. He said he was done with the relationship and that he'd already found somewhere else to stay. Then he had the nerve to offer to pay 2 months of our rent like I was some charity case who couldn't handle my own finances. Proudly, I told him I didn't need his pity money, but he insisted on leaving a check anyway. The whole thing felt so condescending, like he was trying to be the bigger person or something. While we were having this conversation, Sarah was packing up David's stuff and being all supportive and understanding. She kept giving him these meaningful looks and touching his arm, which seemed pretty inappropriate for someone who was supposed to be gay. I could tell she was loving the drama and probably hoping this would be her chance to swoop in and play the supportive friend who helps him through his heartbreak. After David left with Sarah, I spent the rest of the day trying to process what had happened. I kept expecting him to text me or call to talk things through more rationally, but he didn't. I sent him a few more messages over the next couple of days, trying to explain my perspective and asking if we could meet somewhere to discuss things calmly, but apparently he decided to be completely immature about the whole situation. Then I found out through mutual friends that David and Sarah were together now, like romantically together, not just friends. Apparently, the night he moved out, they'd gone out to celebrate with Sarah's brother and some other friends, and Sarah had kissed him. The next morning, they'd had some big conversation about their feelings and decided to start dating. So Sarah went from being a lesbian to being in love with my boyfriend in the span of about 48 hours. Sure, that makes total sense. Obviously, she'd been waiting for an opportunity to make her move, and my stupid mistake at the bar gave her the perfect opening. David was probably so flattered by the attention from someone who was supposedly off limits that he didn't even question how convenient her sudden sexual awakening was. The whole thing was so fast and calculated that it made me wonder if something had been going on between them before our breakup. Not that David would ever cheat, he's too much of a Boy Scout for that. But Sarah definitely knew exactly what she was doing. She'd been playing the long game, being the supportive childhood friend who was always there to listen to David complain about our relationship problems. I tried calling David a few more times to point out how suspicious the timing was with Sarah, but he blocked my number. Apparently, I was now some crazy ex who wasn't allowed to have opinions about his rebound relationship. It was so typical of him to take the coward's way out instead of having an adult conversation about what had actually happened between us. Meanwhile, I was stuck dealing with our lease renewal by myself and figuring out whether I could afford the apartment alone or if I needed to find a roommate. David's little gesture of paying 2 months' rent was helpful, but it didn't solve the bigger problem of him bailing on our shared responsibilities. I have to decide pretty quickly whether to find someone to split the rent with or look for a cheaper place, all because David couldn't handle one embarrassing moment at a bar. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that David had been looking for an excuse to end our relationship for a while. He'd been getting more and more critical of my drinking and more sensitive about every little thing I said. The bar incident was just the final straw he needed to justify breaking up with me and running off with Sarah. If it hadn't been that night, it probably would have been something else eventually anyway. I also started to see how Sarah had been positioning herself as the perfect alternative to me. She never drank too much, or said mean things, or had family drama that stressed her out. She was always calm and supportive and available whenever David needed someone to talk to. Of course, he was going to choose her over me when given the option. She represented this fantasy of a drama-free relationship where nobody ever fought or said hurtful things. Sometimes. I was dealing with my dad's cancer diagnosis and trying to cope the best way I knew how. David never seemed to understand how much pressure I was under or how scared I was about losing my dad. Instead of being patient with me during the worst time in my life, he used one stupid mistake to justify abandoning our 4-year relationship. The thing that really bothers me is how everyone acts like I'm this terrible person who destroyed a perfect relationship through my own selfishness. But nobody talks about how David gave up on us without even trying to work things out. Nobody mentions how quickly he moved on with Sarah, or how convenient it was that she suddenly discovered her attraction to men right when he became available. I'm not saying I didn't make mistakes. Obviously, I shouldn't have had that conversation about Tyler where people could overhear us. And maybe I had been drinking more than I should have been. Past Gretel, impossibly stir-fry. Relationships are supposed to survive mistakes and rough patches. You're supposed to fight for each other, not just walk away the second things get difficult. David always acted like he was this patient, understanding boyfriend, but when I actually needed him to be patient and understanding about my family situation and the stress I was under, he couldn't handle it. The first time I really needed him to forgive me for something significant, he chose to end our relationship instead. That says a lot more about his character than it does about mine. Now he's playing house with Sarah, and everyone thinks they're this perfect couple who found love after tragedy or whatever. But I know Sarah, and I know she's not as sweet and genuine as she pretends to be. She saw an opportunity to get what she'd probably wanted for years, and she took it. Scorn's too naive to see that he's being manipulated by someone who's much smarter than he is about relationships. I'm actually better off without someone who would throw away 4 years over one bad night. If David can't handle being with someone who's dealing with real-life problems and occasionally makes mistakes, then he was never going to be a good long-term partner anyway. I need someone who's strong enough to weather difficult times with me, not someone who runs away to his backup plan the first chance he gets. The whole situation taught me that I can't rely on other people to be there when things get tough. David seemed loyal and dependable until he wasn't. And now I'm dealing with the aftermath of his decision by myself, but I'm handling it just fine, which proves that I never really needed him as much as I thought I did. I'm stronger than he ever gave me credit for, and definitely stronger than he is. So that's what actually happened, not whatever version David and Sarah are telling people. I made one mistake during the worst period of my life. And instead of supporting me through it, my boyfriend of 4 years decided it was easier to start over with someone else. Everyone can judge me for having that conversation about Tyler, but at least I'm not the one who gave up on a long-term relationship without even trying to fight for it.